Hey everyone, welcome back to the Bikepack Adventures Podcast. In this episode, I catch up with Meaghan Hackinen, the first woman across the line in the 2024 Tour Divide mountain bike race. Becoming the first woman to complete the Tour Divide Grand Depart event under 16 days with a finishing time of 15 days, 23 hours, and 0 minutes. Meaghan Hackinen is a British Columbia-based ultra-cyclist, bikepacker, and rider whose two-wheeled adventures have taken her from Haida Gwaii to Mexico's high plateaus, across Canada and the United States, and from North Cape to Tarifa along some of Europe's highest paved roads. She's a multi-faceted rider with a dozen women's wins, several FKTs, as well as a course record at the World 24-Hour Time Trial Championships. Meaghan has an MFA in creative writing and is the author of South Away, The Pacific Coast on Two Wheels, a Kobo Emerging Writing Prize nominee, and Shifting Gears Coast to Coast on the Trans Am bike race. She was the first overall woman of the 2021 BC Epic 1000, 2023 Buckshot and Lost Elephant. In 2024, Meaghan was the first woman across the line in the Tour Divide mountain bike race, Ozark Gravel Doom, and Buckshot. I first got to know Meaghan when she was on the podcast in episode 120 way back in 2021. Meaghan was also the keynote speaker at the inaugural Canadian Shield Bikepacking Summit in 2023, and I was fortunate to host her here for a month she spent in the region while getting out on some bikepacking adventures. It was awesome to follow her on this journey along the Tour Divide, not just as a dot watcher, but also through her captivating social media that allowed us a glimpse into her days on the bike.
Hey, Meaghan, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here, Chris.
And I can't believe
things?
It's 3 times. You know, you're now tied for the most people to have ever done episodes again and again and again on the podcast.
Whoa, I'm super competitive, so I hope
we're going to have to do another one at some point, right? Yeah.
Who am I tied with?
Jonas Dykman. So he's he's more of a road type guy. So he's not not so much the big gravel stuff, but I think right now he's on day 50 of his 120 Ironman distance triathlons in a row. Something like that. Maybe he's day 60 something. That's a little freaking nuts, yeah.
Yeah, that's intense.
Maybe even crazier than you.
Oh, it's always nice when you meet people crazier than you, because then it gives you you're like, oh, I'm moderate. I'm a moderate athlete.
You're like, I'm not weird, I'm normal.
Normal by comparison.
So yeah, let's 15 days, 23 hours. I don't know the minutes, but congratulations.
There's 0 minutes, 15 days, 23 hours. That's it.
Is exactly it. There's 0 minutes. Were you just waiting? You're like, come on.
I'm not sure if that's the time I was recorded at.
That's awesome.
I honestly, I didn't have cell reception, and usually I'm pretty keen to make sure my dot is jumping and check that the time recorded is the actual time, to snap a photo. But I think I was just so overwhelmed to be at the finish. I didn't do any of those normal things. And like I said, I didn't have cell reception, so I wasn't really looking at my phone as much. That's what it's recorded as, 15 days, 23 hours. I was really happy to come in under 16 days.
Yeah.
I mean, I was happy to get to the finish, but when you're getting close to the end, you're always kind of readjusting your goal and to kind of have that to shoot for the last few days was motivating.
I'm really bad at pushing the stop button on my tracker and stuff. So I'll usually get in the house and I shower and I eat and I'm like, oh, I haven't ended my ride. I got to go back out to the garage. If I did the Tour Divide, it'd probably be an extra 10 days just because I'd forget to turn it off. And I'd be like, when did you
dot
finish?
Traveling home.
Yeah, but I was going 900 kilometers an hour at the end.
Right. Well, somebody would notice, hopefully.
Anyways, so oh man, there's so many questions, and yet it's all such a blur as well. What was it like to be at the Grand Depart? I mean, it's a pretty significant starting group there.
The Grand Depart was a highlight, I think, of my year. To be among so many like-minded cyclists from around the world about to embark on this crazy adventure, and to be in Banff, and just an iconic location outside the YMCA. And there were tons of cyclists from the BC, Alberta bikepacking scene there as well. Steve O'Shaughnessy, your podcast competitor, was there.
That is not competitive.
There were friends from I had friends from Edmonton show up, people from not Fernie, but Golden, and folks there to cheer on their friends and strangers. So it was really cool to meet a bunch of bike packers and to have people there to celebrate with. My parents drove me out from Kelowna in their camper van with their like adorable little doggo Sadie. So they were at the campground and they all came to see me, see me off safely. So it was a really exciting celebration. And sometimes I show up without a lot of like extra time, but for this I was there 45 minutes before my wave departed. So I kind of was there
so much extra time just to hang out and meet people, right?
Yeah. I didn't have 45 minutes of unallotted time for like, the following 2 weeks. So
that's true. It's a lot of time, right?
Yeah. So it was really cool. It was a nice morning, a little bit chilly, and I was staying with another bikepacker, Penny Lawless, just up the street. It was like a 5-minute downhill ride to the start, so easy to get to. And if I forgot something, I could always go back and get it, which is kind of reassuring when you're like making sure everything's in your bags and stuff. So yeah.
Oh, okay, so you didn't actually like roll up in your parents' van 45 minutes before. That's what I thought you meant. I was like, Jesus, Meaghan, that's really pushing it. Like,
No. The event starts on Friday. I think we left on Tuesday and we rode to Golden or drove to Golden about 4 hours. And I stayed in Golden for the night with a friend. My parents slept in the van. Sadie, the dog's best friend, moved to Golden. So she had a play date with her old bestie.
Perfect.
Yeah. And so you see how I'm trying not to make this trip all about me. I'm like,
yeah, it's all about the dog.
You can go and take Sadie to see her friends. And then we drove to Banff on Wednesday, and my parents went to the campground, and I stayed with Penny and my coach, Peter McSherry. She lives in Switzerland. She was staying with Penny as well. So we all got to kind of hang out together at Penny's house. It was her partner's birthday, so we had like a really lovely dinner celebration with him, kind of low key, but still fun. And like that's exactly what you want. You don't want to be like going to a big birthday party 2 days before a race. You just want to hang out with some wonderful people and chit chat and connect. So it was perfect. And then Thursday, I just kind of hung out, rode around Banff, chatted with other riders, and got to kind of ground myself, take care of last minute stuff before the event, and make sure my out of office was set so that I didn't have to feel guilty about the pile of emails that I was leaving unanswered. So I was there a few days before. It was nice, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've actually talked to I wouldn't say tons of people, but I've had a few people and say like, "Oh, have you heard of this Meaghan girl?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I know Meaghan." Like but that you were before this Grand Tour Divide, you were kind of an unknown in this world of, in some ways, an unknown in this world of bikepacking, because you do a lot of road events, right? So you've done your 24-hour world time trials and transcontinental, and so lining up for the Tour Divide, did you feel like you're looking around and like, I mean, you must have been recognized because you're from BC and this is all kind of right there.
Yeah, I felt it was definitely different than like the TCR or something like that, and very different from the world of supported ultras for sure. But also reassuring to see some familiar faces and some other salsa cutthroats in the crowd. Yeah, right. And I'm supported by 7-mesh, so there's a pretty prominent 7-mesh like contingency. A lot of people wear that brand there, so it was nice to see people with like the matching butterscotch vest and dorky
it's the Lululemon like of bikepacking.
So I felt quite comfortable. I think because I've done quite a few events in general, I know what it's like to get to the start line and be in that crowd. But I was still nervous. Like I would, I wasn't like intimidated, but I was just more nervous about what I was setting out to try and do. And my stomach like had a really rough day one. I think part of it was not sleeping very well. Part of it was nerves, and part of it was maybe going out a bit too hard. And I just couldn't help myself. I tried not to, but when you get to something like Kobo claims and you're like, I'm just going to power up this big hiker bike and then ride down the other side, you're not taking breaks or anything. And I usually ride with a power meter, so I kind of can tell how hard I'm pushing. And I took my power meter off because I didn't want to damage the power pedals during the race. And I just figured I wouldn't use that data like after the first few days. So I didn't want to bring them and break them. And I think that was the right decision, but they would have been useful on the first day to kind of help maybe govern me and my effort and like, slow me down a bit, because when I got to Fernie, I felt really, really rough and ill. And I actually got a hotel room the first night. And I wasn't planning on it. That wasn't in my budget. but I just felt like I needed to get a good sleep and to sleep a little longer than I had planned. And the temperatures were cold, so I knew that I would get a better sleep in a hotel. So the good news is I think I was able to kind of reset a bit and ride better on day 2 and 3 and 4 than I had planned. But the first day, the start was awesome, but during the ride, I did not feel very good.
So what's Coco Claims like before, just to kind of, I know it's a day one thing. It's a day one question, so I got to go back.
So Kobo Claims, I'd always heard about it because it's a BC bikepacker.
Yeah.
It's one of those sections that people talk about in fear and kind of revere, and it's a rite of passage to do it. But it's a big hike-a-bike over kind of these baby head rocks. I'm not sure how long or how high it is, but it's this serious hike-a-bike. It's unrideable, and if you know that going into it, at least it's not a surprise. It wasn't insanely steep or anything, and there was only a little bit of snow on the top, which was nice. Other years, I think people have been post-holing through it, which would be
I think that
pretty uncomfortable.
Was it 2 years ago that was really bad weather and people were getting airlifted out or whatever, and rescue service?
I think it was a little farther down the line they got rescued, but I'm not positive. But there was a bunch of rescues in the BC, Montana portions, but yeah, it was a serious hike-a-bike. I do the Stairmaster at the gym every session for 6 minutes, and I feel like that prepared me. Kind of joking, but at least I got a little practice walking. And I just treated it as an obstacle in my path that needed to be, I hate using the word conquered, but needed to be surmounted or whatever. I just made it over. And then there were some high water areas on the way down. There was some, not rivers flooding, but more water than would be ideal. And it was quite steep, and my mountain biking skills are still not they're still not great. So I had to walk a lot of the descent.
Oh, you did, huh?
Which is always, yeah. And then people are passing me. And also I'm using a salsa cutthroat, a rigid drop bar bike. And a lot of people use suspensions and mountain bike flat bars. So that gives you kind of better maneuverability on the descent.
So there are more and more riders kind of putting on the front suspension, huh?
For sure, yeah. I was looking at bikepacking's rigs of the Tour Divide, and quite a few have front suspensions now.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what the percentage is, but maybe 35, 40. And there's I think 6 with full suspension, and it was 1 on a full suspension bike. So,
yeah. I know. I have front suspension on my hardtail now, and I don't know. I have 45-year-old wrists maybe 60-year-old wrists on a 44-year-old person. And I was like, oh, it's so nice to have suspension just to take out some of that shock, I mean, Redshift does a lot. Redshift helps a lot, but when you're like track, it's not the same,
Yeah, I had the Redshift suspension stem, and I'm really glad that I did. I finished the race without serious hand issues, and a lot of other ultras, I can't hold a pen, I can't do up a zipper, and I was I'd say 98% functional,
nice.
Which is a great feeling.
What was the 2%?
Just numbness, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, and a little bit of the pinky finger doesn't want to extend as far as some of the letters on my keypad.
And have you I know you had that the problem, I forget, was it your pinky finger? No, it's
Oh, my wonky finger.
Wonky
yeah,
finger.
I dislocated. I dislocated the finger next to my pinky finger, and then the pinky finger was messed up, and I finally got in to see a doctor because our healthcare isn't the greatest. And he looked at it, and he basically was like, well, it's really stiff, and you should have been seeing a physio, but it's fine. You just should have been doing physio. And I was like, well, I couldn't afford physio because I don't have benefits. And now, thank you for telling me. It would have been nice to be able to see someone less than 10 months after my accident. But anyways, yeah, that's all healed up. Once he told me that I didn't really have any underlying injuries and it was just stiff, I started flexing it and moving it more because you don't want to be re-injuring something, right? So I'd kind of been babying this
Dr. Evil everywhere
you
go. Dr. Evil, hey.
I was totally Dr. Eviling everything, and I was taping it and stuff, and he was just like, no, you just gotta bend it. So Yeah, I won't complain about our healthcare system. I'm sure it's much worse south of the border, but I do wish I had extended benefits because I can't afford specialty medical services,
I
right?
also dislocated the finger right next to my, the ring finger, I guess you call it. And,
ring finger, yeah.
And I went to the university doctor's office and they put it back in place. And my housemates drive me home. I'm like, yeah, it feels a lot better. And I hold my hand up and she goes, dude, that finger's not straight. Like, you need to go to the hospital. I kind of do the arm out in front of me. I'm like, oh yeah, it is still kind of crooked. Like, thank you, Canada. So I went to the hospital. 6 hours later, something stupid, 9 hours, I got it fixed.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah. What is the wall? I've been meaning to ask. I know I always see things about Coco Claims, the wall, and they both sound awful. But
yeah, it's just what it sounds like. It's this wall. I think it's in on the kind of ascent of Galton Pass, right before the U.S. border in BC. And you're kind of on a Forest Service road, and then you're on like kind of a quad trail, and then you're on a bit of a trail, and then the trail just goes up this mountain and like straight up. It was pretty muddy, and I was glad that I was going southbound and not northbound, because northbound you have to descend it somehow, and I can't imagine how you would get down it. I think steeper things for me are harder going down than going up.
Maybe a toboggan, like slide down, just
maybe. I mean, I think if you had a lot of gear, you'd want to unload your bike and take your gear down and then take your bike down. That could be an option to kind of portage stuff, but it's not a long section. Like it probably only takes like 5 minutes or something. I could be totally off. I have a difficult time remembering the start of the journey.
Yeah.
But it was nowhere near as long as Coco Claims. It's kind of a short little hit, but it is very, very steep. And, you're kind of like pulling yourself up by like trees with one arm and holding your bike with the other. And then you have the rest of the ascent up Galton Pass, and then it's like snowing and slushing and hailing when I got to the top. It was just absolutely disgusting. One of those situations where you're like, if I had gotten up like an hour earlier, I could have been over the top by now, right?
Right.
And I talked to people who got through before the weather turned, and you're like, oh, damn it.
Well, you had to make the choice, right? You chose Fernie to kind of get your headspace back. I think
that's right.
And so then you just had to have a little bit of suffering later to remind you that Fernie was comfortable.
Yeah, that's true. And the other thing that I'll mention was Lava Mountain, which is after Helena. And I didn't know about Lava Mountain. It slipped my radar or whatever. But there was a guy offering kind of unilateral support up at the top, and I didn't take anything from him. I just stopped and chatted with him, and he was kind of like, yeah, it's pretty rough up here, especially with the snow. And I said something like, yeah, that road was pretty potholed. And he was like, oh, no, you haven't started the hard part yet. And I was like, oh, shoot. Damn, I thought I was like about to start descending, right? And it was just kind of really rough quad trail, lots of roots and slippery things and not entirely rideable. And when things are less than 50% rideable, I usually just walk because I don't like mounting and dismounting. So I just feel like I'm, kind of in that power through mindset, hike a bike. And yeah, it was pretty gross and messy and totally unexpected for me, which might have been a good thing so that you're not like dreading it. And then, coming down, like you've been up at elevation for a while and you've been getting snowed on. And now you're cold and you have a long descent. So I struggled on the descent, keeping my hands, functional, and other people seemed to have a difficult time as well. It was pretty awful weather at the front of the pack.
Yeah,
but
you had some mitts, right? I think I saw in one of your videos.
That's right. Yeah, I did the Buckshot in BC. I got really cold hands and I invested in some better cycling gear. And I think they're like maybe the North Face full-on like shell mitts, and they're great. They're completely waterproof. You just wear a pair of gloves underneath to kind of keep your hands cozy. It was awesome. Like, of course, your hands don't work as well in drop bars and braking and stuff with mitts, but it was fine. I didn't ever feel like I was, steering erratically because of the mitts, and they really keep your hands toasty.
And I know the weather really started taking a turn that day 3, day 4, right? So it kind of you got hit with some cruddy stuff.
Yeah, there was some snow, and rain and hail, and the high passes, like the snow had melted for the most part by the time we arrived, but we're getting fresh snow. So kind of, like you said, the weather turned, and it kind of affects everyone else differently. But the morning I think I left Lincoln, which isn't too far past Ovando. Like I got to Ovando, where there's a great resupply, and Kathy from the angler shop like takes photos. So it's a kind of iconic spot on the route. And there was a pass that I did in the dark in like grizzly country, and it poured rain on the descent into Lincoln. And of course I didn't have a hotel because I didn't have cell reception to book one. So I had to find like a dry place to sleep, and then set out in the morning, and it's like 0 degrees. So as soon as you gain any elevation, there's going to be snow. And there was a pretty nasty set of passes. And the Llama Lodge was in between Lincoln and Helena, and a lot of people stopped there for a warm-up, for coffee, for resupply. And I didn't. I just wanted to power through and get to Helena. But it was pretty rough, pretty cold, lots of pushing your bike uphill. I don't think my gearing was the best. I don't think I've ridden my bike with this much gear. So I could have used a few more gears in some of the climbs. I think I walked places where other people could ride because they had more gear options. But anyways, the day I left Lincoln, the weather was gross.
What was your gearing, if you don't mind me asking?
I believe I had a 34 in the front and like an 11 by 42 in the back. Ain't that fun? I don't really pay attention to stuff like that.
Yeah. So I guess I don't know if you had like a full-on Eagle cassette or something with like that big monster. That would have been ideal, maybe.
Plus the Eagle sounds cool. Take you flying, man.
And it sounds cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds expensive.
The Tour Divide was so expensive. I can't even imagine what it costs people who take more than like 15 days, like every gas station resupply, and it's just a small fortune.
Well, I was talking to somebody that did the Trans Am recently, and he said like he spent like $120 US per day in convenience stores. And I was like, what the hell? How is that? Like, that is a lot of money in convenience store spending. Like, do you have an idea of what you spent roughly? Like,
no, I have no clue.
You probably don't want to know.
Yeah, I looked at my credit card bill just to make sure there weren't any extra charges, because I was like, this is a lot higher than usual. And it was all me. It wasn't unusual to spend like $30 to $50 in a convenience store. And I try not to buy like, I'm looking for deals. I'm trying to buy normal things, not like specialty products. One of the cheap options that I liked was in Wyoming and other states. They have these like little hand pies in cardboard boxes.
Okay.
And they're usually like $1 or $2 and 400 to 500 calories. So pretty good bang for your buck.
Yeah.
Lots of sugar and
who doesn't love
carbs.
pie, right? Like.
Oh, and if you put them in your back pocket, they warm up a bit, kind of like a Pop-Tart. So they're pretty yummy. And they've got like peach. Apple's a bit boring, but they had a Boston cream flavor, which I kind of got obsessed with. Yeah, one day I bought like 6 of them and put them in a Ziploc bag so they'd take up less room, and just ate one an hour. And I was pretty happy. I did not get sick of them. If I kept finding them, I would have kept eating them. And then I ate a ton of licorice. Like I like, Twizzlers. Cherry or strawberry or whatever. Yeah, it's cheap. It's high in carbs.
I love licorice.
It's in my feed sack. Red or black?
Red, but like jujubes, I really like the black ones. So
same. I'm totally on the same boat as you with that one. Yeah.
See, we've biked together. It's clear.
Right? Oh, what I wouldn't have done for like a poutine shack. Like I'm sure I'd be like sleepy after from all like the grease and stuff, but that would have been a nice stop.
Is there anything you got really sick of? You like went into the store and you're like, oh fuck, they don't have what I want. Like, and I just gotta eat this. Like, I don't know what that might have been.
I think like just like dull resupplies. Like I went into maybe a Chevron or something, and it was my last resupply in New Mexico, in Silver Springs. And it was just like what I saw. I had eaten at McDonald's and I needed to get something. And it was just not a very big convenience store at the gas station. And I didn't want to go into another shop. I just wanted to take care of it. It I think sometimes it's nice to not have too many options, but in this case, I was just like, there's nothing good here. And I got some like mini donuts. I think I got some Skittles. I got some Payday bars. I like Paydays. I don't.
I've never
think we have
had
them in
one,
Canada.
but I've heard of them, but I don't know.
Yeah, they're kind of like this toffee rolled in peanuts. So
Okay.
they're pretty
Maybe like a
peanutty.
little bit like an Eat More.
Yeah, a little bit,
Okay.
except full peanuts.
Okay.
Yeah, so pretty peanutty. So I got a couple of those, and yeah, it was just a bit dull, I guess. And then I got sick of candy. I eat a lot of candy because I find it's easy to eat, and I have trouble remembering to eat. And I have a little alarm on my Wahoo that says snack face, and it's a reminder. It's my eating reminder, and sometimes I ignore it. But if I have candy, at least I can always eat a
Yeah.
handful of like gummies. But it doesn't bring me joy. It's like just very functional.
Yeah. And like, I don't know, but like you, like when it's raining, it's really hard to motivate yourself to like eat as well because, you're just like digging into your candy bag or your food
Yeah.
bag and everything's wet. And you're like, I'm just going to gross everything up more. And I don't know, I find it like tough to like find the opportunity to
I
stuff
am
my face.
completely there with you. When it's raining or snowing, or if I'm wearing my gloves, like I don't want to take my gloves off or get my mitts dirty. So those times I would eat less for sure.
Yeah. And you did a great job with your social. I mean, I know you're, what's her name? Meg? No.
Mel.
Sorry, I forget her name. Mel. I knew it started with an M. Mel did all the posting for you. Did you just like stick everything on Google Drive and share a folder type thing, or how did you run that?
Yeah. We actually we use WhatsApp, and I had a check-in group that was full of people in my life that were close to me that wanted to stay in touch. And I knew from the past it gets really time-consuming to send everyone individual messages. So I figured
Yeah,
I'd throw them all in one group and mass message everyone, and then they
perfect.
can talk about me amongst themselves if they want to. So they can be like, oh, looks like Megan's doing this, or Megan's here. And there was a couple of Tour Divide riders in the group who kind of shared information with the group about where I was and
Oh,
kind
okay.
of like shared details that I didn't have time to talk about really, right? So that
Yeah.
was really helpful. But I put little updates in there, and then voice messages and photos, and she just pulled from that.
Oh, that's a
And
brilliant
then
idea.
and she was following the race pretty closely, and she's done commentary on other events like the BC Epic. So I think she kind of understands how to follow a race and what details make for good storytelling. So she kind of took what I gave her and did a little route research and, taking a look at the other dots and the terrain and the info that people were sharing in the group, and wrote up these posts. It was really, really awesome to be able to share my story in real time because, as you know, I'm a writer, but you can't write when you're racing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to focus on being competitive and not like writing Instagram story posts. Yeah, and we discussed beforehand like what kind of voice she was going to use, and we had like a protocol, like if I scratched, like how she would communicate that to people. So we
Oh,
talked a lot about like what things would look like, and how I wanted to share my experience, and like kind of what brands to tag and all of that kind of stuff.
no, that's
And
very cool. That's really like deeply
yeah,
done.
yeah, it was awesome. When I did the log driver's waltz, when I was staying with you
hmm
for that whole month.
When was that?
Um,
I hardly remember.
oh, I bet you guys missed
We
me.
did.
But I had my partner James doing some updates for me, and I would send him notes and photos, and just for the 43 hours or however long it took me to finish that route. And it was cool to see that people enjoyed that and followed along. James was doing the Great American Wheel Race, so we were like not really talking to each other. We were just pretty deep in our own ultras, and been nice reconnecting with him now that we're both done.
What is the Great American Wheel Race? Like, how long is that thing?
I think it's 3,600 miles,
Wow,
and
is it
it's a
really?
new
Okay, I've never
route.
heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a new route across the U.S., and it favors gravel roads and rail trails. But you can talk to James about it. He wasn't so
Yeah.
impressed with
Oh, yeah?
several aspects.
Mm. Is it meant to be like, yeah, so it's more gravel and stuff. So it's not meant to be primary roads. It's not like the Trans Am where you're kind of stuck on a route that's going to have lots of traffic and stuff. Even though I think they did a pretty good job of using lesser paved roads.
Yeah. I think Trans Am's kind of morphed into bike nonstop, and I'm not sure about the routes they use, but the idea is that they focus more on quieter roads and gravel. But I think, just like it's hard when there's a new event like the Great American Wheel Race, and there's probably, I think there were some hiccups with reroutes and maybe not the best road choices and stuff, because it's hard to put together a route that is that long.
Yeah, I was actually kind of wondering, like, I still don't know the details of what's this bike nonstop versus the Trans Am, because it's like two different routes and they start at the same time and they follow sometimes along the same routes and then they cut off, and I don't know. But it was pretty interesting. Like Rob Byron and I were chatting a lot following Henry Doe, who is a Canadian guy from Montreal racing Trans Am. And then as he was getting sicker, and like it was really amazing to watch, and got sick and then eventually DNF'd. It was right when the time when Tour Divide was starting, and we're both like messaging every day, cheering on Meaghan, and of course talking about the front guys. And yeah, it's just an amazing tour this year. It was kind of, I've said it before, but it was really neat to be invested into dot watching, where I'm not usually I'm just like, I check things out. And this year I knew competitors, so I was kind of looking at it a little bit more, and quite fun.
Cool. Yeah, it's really exciting when you know some of the faces like behind the dots, and you're kind of curious to see how they will perform. And I think it was exciting that both like Uba and Justinas had, they competed last year, and here they were facing off again with all that knowledge they have picked up from the previous year, and probably more specific training and gear prep, and I was really excited to see how they would do, and to see them both break Mike Hall's record with the added single track sections and some pretty rough weather and parts was so exciting for me. Like I was pretty stoked.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable. Like just. Especially when you see on track leaders, you see the dots for Lael and you see the dots for Mike Hall, and you're like, holy God, like these guys are ahead. And like you and Lael was just like, it was going back and forth a lot until Colorado sometime kind of thing.
In northern New Mexico is where I kind of fell off her pace. And I think that, she set that record on an ITT after she'd already raced it. So I have so many questions for her actually about it, but I think that she had a better idea what was coming and probably paced herself better in the first 2/3 and maybe rested a little bit more when I was pushing harder. And then when it came to the end, I think she was able to kind of not just maintain, but speed up a bit to really push to get a great time. Whereas when I got to New Mexico, I was worn down and beat up, and my speeds were slowing down, and I wasn't able to kind of like make that hero push for a better time. I was struggling a lot more than I was in the first half. So I mean, that's just my theory. I'm not exactly sure how the ITT went for her, but based on how close our dots were for so much of the race, I just felt like she was pulling away from me, and I couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, I was watching. I'm like, oh my God, is she gonna like just gonna pull it back up? But I know like Lael's a very, very fast rider too, and it's like it'd be hard. I mean, obviously it's hard. It's not meant to be easy, but it's like if you could do it, that'd be so cool. But it was pretty awesome. And even you and Anna, like it was really, you guys were so close to each other for so much of the race. I mean, it felt like pretty much until the end, right? Like she was in New Mexico. When you were finishing, she was not that many hours behind you. Maybe 10 hours?
It was really exciting to have Anna as a front runner in female competition, because the last year there was a lot of women racing. There was like the whole group of strong female athletes right up, in the top maybe 25. And this year it was really like a 2-horse race between me and Anna. Mary Soleil Blades, I think from Quebec, was racing, and she had some early mechanicals and stuff that really set her back. So it was kind of just the two of us, and it was awesome for me to, at least if I'm going to have one other female competitor, like I want her to be really strong, right? Like I want to have a strong person to push me. And I think that that's the value and the beauty of competition is it can make you kind of rise up to the challenge. And I don't know if I would have raced so hard if it hadn't been for Anna and for Lael's time to kind of, keep pushing me on, because Lael's time proves that, it's possible to go faster. And every morning I'd wake up and check the tracker, and Anna would be closer to me than I'd feel comfortable. So I'd like hop in the saddle and just, be on a mission again. I was really, really focused after kind of seeing, because she seemed to ride later in the nights in some of the, in the second half. And I go to bed and she'd be at one spot, like 70 miles back. And I'd wake up and she'd be like 30 miles back. And I'd be like, oh, God, where?
So I was wondering, I'm like, were you just like, oh my God, and like it just motivated you to push harder and further, and like you said, you kind of did.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess you're not going to be like, oh, I can't wait to see how she's doing. Let's see when she catches me. So you keep pushing up.
We did cross paths a couple times. One was at Brush Mountain Lodge, so I arrived in the evening, and I had some pizza, got my laundry done, went to bed. I woke up and she had arrived while I was sleeping, and she was eating like a bowl of noodles and hanging out in the kitchen living room area. And she was like, do you know about the sleep situation? And I was like, Anna, how did you get here? She ended up sleeping in the same room I was in.
Oh, that's wild.
In the other bed. So we just kind of traded places. And then I was just like, oh my gosh, like how long is she going to sleep for? She looks so fresh. I feel so destroyed. Like, so it was cool to cross paths with her, but very unsettling because, I'm hoping to expand my lead, and instead she's catching up to me. Yeah. And then the following night I got a hotel in Silverthorne, and I checked in a bit later than I wanted to, but went to bed, woke up in the morning, and she was also in Silverthorne, like 6 kilometers from me. And again, very unsettling.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. So there was times like
probably pounding coffee before you wake up. So when you see her, she looks so fresh, and you're like,
I know, right? And then at the end of the race, I finished. I was staying at the ranch, and then Jeffrey Sharp dropped me off at the Hitchita store so that I could eat a bunch of food and drink coffee. And Anna was there, resupplying before she made her final push to the finish on the Continental Divide Trail section. So it was great. We got a photo. She's like eating ice cream. And it was just nice to see her kind of at the end of the event, and we chatted a bit on day one, which was fun as well.
Oh, neat.
I think going over Elk Pass in kind of between BC and Alberta, we rode that together.
Oh, nice. Okay. And I know you got caught in a big storm in Atlantic City. So what was it like? I guess because it was like daytime, right? It was morning, and it's kind of time where you typically want to ride, and you're like just jammed up with a huge storm coming through the basin.
That's right. Yeah. It was early afternoon, but I had made a push from Pinedale to try and get through the basin that day. And the weather was really hot. Like I'd been, kind of in the mountains where there's some shade and some trees. And all of a sudden you're in this like super open place. And I lost my cycling gloves, and I could just like feel my hands getting sunburned. And, I'm 1 minute you're worrying about a sunburn, and the next, like the storm clouds are just building, and then, they unleash on you, and it's hailing and raining. And I rolled up to Atlantic City in, pretty terrible weather. And it's hard to kind of like adjust plans. Like I was pretty excited to get through the basin and thought maybe if I didn't get through it, I would bivvy out there somewhere. But I didn't expect to not start when I wanted to, because the weather had been so, it had been raining a little bit, but not storming. So, so I took a time out. I ate some food. I found a place to sleep for a few hours, and I headed out in the evening, and I got to ride through at night, and there was a full moon. It was really beautiful, and I managed to avoid any rain, but I got to a part where the ground was still wet, and I actually passed Thomas Fabian, who was a little bit ahead of me, and he got stuck in the mud. And so he was sleeping on the side of the road in his bivvy, and I was celebrating for like a whole of 10 seconds as I passed him while he was sleeping, and then I got stuck and had to do the exact same thing. But yeah, at first it was really frustrating to have to stop because of the weather. It was hard to accept. It felt like the universe was just being so unfair to me because I'd been working so hard and I'd been doing everything right, and then you get thrown this curveball. And it's important to remember that like everybody's being thrown curveballs. Nothing is guaranteed, and the weather is like the biggest the biggest unknown. I felt like it was like Hunger Games out there with the environment trying to kill us a few times. And this was just one of those times.
And I figure like, you might not get hit with the weather. You might get caught up in something at one point and get lucky later. And everybody else is kind of having their own negative downs. They're going to see you get through something and be like, damn it. And it might be like, Meaghan made it through this. And then 5 hours later, she gets to something and then gets hit and whatever, right? Like there's no, you don't know. It's so unpredictable.
It is. And there's no point in thinking about fairness or thinking about whether or not it impacts other people. Like those, it's not helpful to kind of have that mindset. And I think near the end, like Uba and Lauren's tandem got stuck in some pretty crappy weather, and how frustrating must it have been for them, right? Like, right. You're close to the end of the race. You're trying to wrap this thing up, and you can't go forward in peanut butter and mud. It's different than other weather I've encountered in the past, where you can kind of just like, grit your teeth and bear it, and it's uncomfortable and it will end. But when the road surface is unrideable, it really there's no option. You have to stop.
Isn't
it just
that
depends on
wild?
where you choose to stop.
Like
It
this
is.
mud is the way it is. It's just like, and I've heard it's like same thing in Unbound. Is it Unbound that gets peanut butter muddy as well? I think so. Like just
Yeah.
crazy mud roads.
Yeah, for sure. I feel lucky to be, I guess, living and training in a place where that doesn't happen. Like it can be a bit muddy. You can come home dirty, but
Yeah.
you can still ride it.
Yeah, you wouldn't be in the middle somewhere and call your significant other and be like, can you pick me up? The road's turned to peanut butter again. I'm going nowhere.
They can't get you. The
There's
cars
no
can't
way they
travel
would
on
get to you.
it.
Right?
Yeah. You're kind of stuck, and you have to shelter in place. The good thing about New Mexico, at least, is it wasn't cold. Whereas the basin in Wyoming, like it's still quite chilly there. But at least in New Mexico, you were, at the time that we were there, this late in the season, you're not at risk of like, hypothermia or something. You're just going to be a little wet and uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's a good point. Talking about your bike, I know you're riding your Cutthroat and you had a redshift stem. Any other modifications, things you have set up on it, or to just talk about?
I have a Ghost Rider equipment bear spray holder, which I find really good for carrying bear spray. So that's on one of my forks. I had another bear spray holder that I used to hold my sleeping pad. So I think that maybe was like a little bit of a special feature. The sleeping pad, it's homemade. I think it's a piece of like that stuff that you put on your windshield when it's really hot to keep the sun off.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just that cut into a small piece to lie down on. So it's a nice like DIY budget item. And I was really glad I brought it because the ground was cold when I was sleeping outside a few times, and it gives
How
you a
long
little
is it?
extra, probably like 3.5 feet, 4 feet. It's
Okay.
not very long. I cut it to kind of just do my hips and shoulders. And it's not more than like a foot wide. It's pretty narrow. So again, just for the hips. But yeah, it was awesome. Really glad that I brought it. It was kind of bulky. I didn't know where to put it. I had it on my seat post bag, but I worried it would fall off. And so that's why I ended up with it on the fork. And I don't trust blow up mats for like unpredictable surfaces where like I just knew that if I got a flat in my mat, I couldn't deal with it. It would just be like dead to me, and I'd have to throw it out.
It'd be one more thing to drive you nuts, like when there's enough head stuff going on in a race, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I don't have the mental capacity to patch something like that. Like I could do a tire, but not a mat. Like, yeah, I always end up putting those in the bathtub or whatever. So that was a little bit of a special feature. But other than that, I had aero bars on my bike. I took off my power pedals. I used a full frame bag for my water bladder and stuffed my gloves and small pieces in there. And all my bigger stuff went in my seat post bag. But yeah, nothing really too special. I had a dynamo, which was nice.
Okay,
This
I was
was the
gonna ask.
first. Yeah, it was great. I haven't done a long race with a dynamo before, and charging has always been an issue for me. And because I wanted to be competitive, and I didn't expect to be sitting down and having a lot of meals, and I didn't expect to be eating hotels every night, your charging options are really limited. So I used the dynamo for basically everything except for my phone, which I charged off my charging block, and I usually charged up the block when I was in a hotel. And I didn't find it super efficient to charge off the dynamo for like to recharge the block off the dynamo, but it worked great for my computer, for my headlamp battery, and for there's one other thing. Those two things anyways. Oh, my InReach. I charged my InReach off of it.
Okay. And sorry, we're using just a headlamp for, like, was it a bike mounted light or in a battery one, or is it dynamo light as well?
No, it was just a headlamp. I don't remember what brand, but I put a little piece of I took off the band and I put a Velcro piece through the lamp part, and then I wrapped the Velcro through the holes in my helmet to put it on.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a little bit of a DIY thing. It seems to work well. I'm not sure how waterproof it is, so I'm a little hesitant to take it out when it's raining, but so far I haven't really had to ride that much in the rain at night. And I don't think you need a headlamp when you're using like one of those K lights, but to see in your bags, to check my gloves, like I'd often have to be putting my gloves on at night or layering up, and it's nice to kind of have that eye on your forehead.
Yeah, I find like with the K light, it's great, but if you're going uphill too at nighttime, it's not the best because you're not getting at least when I have. I don't know, I forget what model I have, but the power goes down, and so there's a lot more shadows on rocks, which just makes everything a little bit more reckless. And so sometimes maybe having a headlamp is just a good call.
Yeah, definitely. And for all that kind of camp stuff, it's otherwise I'm like holding my phone in my mouth or doing something stupid.
Gloves in your mouth while you get your food bags out, and
yeah.
What else? I had some little things. Oh yeah, what was it like to like, were there many situations where dog watchers were on the sides of roads and stuff? I know there was who was it? What's his name? And you were so stoked in your video too. You're like, oh my God, it's like, is this really you?
Yeah, Jay Peterberry.
Jay Peterberry, that's who it was.
Yeah, that was a lovely surprise. I think he popped out in Idaho a couple times, and he lives there, and obviously is someone who knows the route really well. So yeah, it was fun to see him. Also, just folks who are fans of the route and who live near the route or en route. Some people would have like coolers, and they would leave them out and say like Tour Divide riders, and there'd be some snacks and cold drinks. That was great. I feel like I ran into more people in the first half of the route than later on, and I think the dots are a bit more clumped up in the first half too. So you can see more people in a shorter amount of time. And a lot of people had cowbells, or they'd be on the top of a little hill ringing them, and it's a great way. I mean, I didn't have tons of human interaction, so at least I had a few with dot watchers. That was really lovely. If you haven't used your voice for a few hours, it's nice to remember that you can talk and engage with people. And it was definitely a little boost. A few times for me, one night in particular, I was coming into Butte, and I am always later than I think I'm going to be. It just depends on how much. So I was later than I expected coming into Butte, and it was dark, and it felt like I was dragging on a bit. And there's a woman ringing a bell on the road, just really excited to see me. And I stopped. I talked to her for maybe 3 minutes, and I guarantee you I made those 3 minutes up because I picked up my pace coming into town after that. And it was, it was really uplifting. I'm stoked that the route has such support for the race, and the people along the route and the businesses. It was really exciting to see. And, the last big ultra I did was the Transcontinental, and the route changes every year, so people don't necessarily know about it. I had one guy come out to see me, and he was an ultra racer that I think I'd met in another event, and he happened to live in a town in Italy that a lot of people seem to route through, so he had come out, and that was a lovely surprise. But this was nearly every day people would be out there, and really, really cool to see. I would love to do that, like if I lived along the route, I would totally be there ringing a bell. I'd have a cooler out for people to kind of take what they wanted. And of course it's a self-supported ultra, but, I think the cooler thing is a nice little treat for people, and you could keep it stocked for the duration of the race. I think it wouldn't be too difficult.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's always kind of fun too, right? To just see people, and I think like your middle of the night story when you get to use your brain a bit more and actually talk to somebody, and it just kind of wakes you up. I think it
does, totally does.
Gets you out of your own mind headspace for a while.
Yeah, and I always try and be. I try and be positive. I try and like, keep the thoughts in a good place. But sometimes weird things happen when you're on the road for 16 or more hours, right? Like you just start to unravel a bit. So it connects you to the real world, which is a good thing.
That's true. Any major mechanical issues throughout the event? I think you broke a derailleur hanger.
I did. Yeah, that was kind of random. I don't even know what happened. I must have smacked a rock. I was on a pretty rough descent down Union Pass, which is, I think it's above 3,000 meters. So it's pretty high. And I'd been dropping my chain, and I knew that I needed a new chain, and I knew I needed to adjust my gears. And I was just kind of waiting for an opportunity to do that, to get to a bike shop. And so I just thought I'd drop my chain, and I looked down, and the chain is dropped, and the derailleur is hanging from it. I was like, oh, this is a bigger problem than I imagined. I always carry a spare derailleur hanger in my toolkit, but I worried it was my road bike derailleur hanger, because sometimes I mix those things up, and I mix up my tools, and it's obviously a specific item for a specific bike. So when I looked at my toolkit and I pulled it out and I saw that it matched, I was like a huge sigh of relief, because I figured at least if I had the piece, I could change it. And it wasn't too difficult. I had been watching YouTube videos on bike repair and trying to do some things myself. Like I broke my chain and I put it back together, and I just, I practiced a few things before I left, but changing my derailleur hanger was not one of the things I practiced. So, and watching and doing something are obviously two different things, but I really, I was glad that I got it on again. The worst thing probably was the mosquitoes that were buzzing around me while I was trying to do it. And, other than that, I replaced my brake pads once. I replaced my chain. I had a bike shop adjust my shifting once. And I mean, those are things I could do myself, but I'd rather have somebody else do them so that I can resupply, or I can just like sit around and put my feet up and not have to think too hard. And then coming down from I think Boreal Pass in Colorado, I got a pretty bad puncture and stuffed a bunch of bacon strips in it. And the next day it started leaking. Put another strip, but I was able to get to a bike shop and have my tire swapped out. Like I was saying to you earlier, the Tour Divide is not a place you want to be using tubes, because you're going to get a lot of punctures.
Yeah.
Like things, tubeless tires are really nice on that kind of terrain, especially as you get further south and there's thorns and things like that in the desert as well.
Oh, and you got a pretty good cactus in your leg too, right? Or cacti? One cactus.
I did. I got nailed.
Dude, that thing looks painful. I was watching him pry that out and I was like, what the hell? Like, that looks brutal.
I was really glad that there was someone around to document it, because that wasn't the case for many of my experiences. And I rode the last stretch, maybe 55 kilometers, with Thomas Fabian from the Czech Republic. And I came around a corner, clipped this cactus. They were everywhere. There was all sorts of spiky things. And I just stood there. I didn't know what to do. And my initial reaction was to rip it out. And I couldn't touch it. So I had to reconsider what to do. And I reached for the first two things in my bags. One was my multi-tool and the other one was my toothbrush. And I used those two things to pry it off. It was a cactus with like 3 arms stuck into me and probably 50 prickles at different angles. So it didn't want to come out nicely.
Oh, it's okay.
It was rough. And like in the video, you can hear my grunts and noises. And yeah, and it hurt, but I was pretty determined at that point to get to the finish. It was so close to the end, and I couldn't imagine pedaling with a cactus in my leg. Like that just sounds really damaging for the
Although it would have been
muscles
pretty
and stuff.
epic, with like people had been like, and Meaghan, she rode the last 100 kilometers with a cacti stuck to her leg. Like,
Yeah, that would be a great story to go out on.
the legend
for
of
sure.
Meaghan Hackinen.
I already come through this like flooded road and fallen into it a couple times. So I was like covered in mud, and then I had this cactus in my leg, and my teeth are just like thick with Twizzlers and peanuts, and I was a monster by the time I got to the finish. I was a disgusting,
so funny.
filthy, prickled person.
Yeah, all right. Who Who was your go-to people, for messages and stuff, just to motivate you for morale? Did you have any times where you're like really lost, you're losing your head, and these people came in clutch?
There was a few of my randonneur cycling friends from Saskatoon, and a few of the moms in my life who are always keen to hear what I'm up to and always there to say, like, keep going. You're doing the thing, Meaghan. Like, you're getting there. When things were falling apart heavily, I turned to my own mom, and I got an inReach this year, and I had the unlimited messaging option. So I was sending her messages, and she sent me a lot of uplifting things when she could see that I was slowing down or really struggling. I had a difficult time in the Continental Divide sections, or Continental Divide Trail sections. And as you experienced firsthand when I rode your route, I am not the best trail rider, and I get frustrated pretty easily on single track.
Yeah.
And it's something I need to continue working on. And I know this. It's a Meaghan thing. But I became really like disheartened, and just seeing my pace drop so slow, so fast, and I was falling off the bike, and I didn't want to get hurt, and I ended up walking quite a bit. And my mom was kind of just pinging me saying, everyone's going slow right now, like, keep moving, don't stop, like, you're doing great, just keep going, just really positive, and not letting me like feed myself too much of a story of like, the sympathy sob story. And one time she messaged me, and she was like, don't consider yourself the victim. And I totally was considering myself the victim. She was like, remember, you chose to do this. Yeah. You can see my like 1.2 mile per hour pace. And she's like, Meaghan's got to be a real sorry state right now. So it was great having someone sending me those messages. And it was also nice just kind of having one person send me those messages, because it's a bit overwhelming to have your device pinging all the time. And I don't necessarily need to share all of my lows with the universe. I was probably glad that I didn't have cell reception, so that I couldn't like complain to the entire check-in group. And I knew my mom was updating them and saying like, oh, Meaghan's having a bit of a rough go right now, but she'll get through it. She always does.
You know her. You know Meaghan.
Meaghan.
And like, were you and James just kind of following each other's dots throughout the event, or like it was just too much on the go?
I didn't look at his dot at all once I started racing. Yeah, nothing. And I got a couple messages from him saying like, you're doing really great. I'm excited for you. But we just didn't. We just focused on our own races.
Seems like you just focused on your race.
I mean, I was the one chasing after the women's record, but he was in second place until he DNF'd. So he was doing really well as well.
Did he?
So yeah, on a fixed gear. So it was pretty exciting.
That's pretty
I followed him before I started. It is, yeah. And our paths actually, we didn't cross, but our routes crossed in Butte, Montana. So that's the place that we both went through. Yeah.
Very neat. How awesome is Pie Town?
Oh, it's everything I dreamed of. I won't say and more. It's everything I dreamed of. The pie was delicious. I wasn't sure if I was going to stop or not. I kind of hoped to get there before stuff opened. And I arrived a little bit later, and I didn't sleep well the night before, so I was a bit cranky, and nothing improves the mood like pie and ice cream and coffee. So I really enjoyed that stop, and would recommend it to anybody touring, racing if you have time. It is slightly off route. You got to climb a small hill, but it's a great stop, an aptly named town. And then after that, you head into the Gila Forest, and there's nothing for like 300 kilometers in terms of resupply. I think there's a vending machine at the Beaver Lodge, like ranger station. I didn't stop there, but I basically like filled up my water in a creek, and that was all I got from the next 300K.
Yummy.
And somebody almost ran me over. That was unfortunate.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was on one of those farm roads, and I could see a car like swerving erratically and just all over the road, and they were approaching me on my side of the road, and it was, gravel. And I just rolled into the ditch because I felt uncomfortable. And then when I looked up, the tire tracks like swerved off of the road where I was. And
are you serious?
Yeah, it was really unsettling. And I can't imagine they didn't see me, or maybe they just didn't care. I don't think they were trying to murder me, but it was an uncomfortable experience to kind of realize that if I didn't take action, I could have been hit by a car in the middle of nowhere, like poor J. Peter Very.
Yeah.
And yeah. So I took a minute to gather myself, got back on the bike, started pedaling. And I was feeling a bit lethargic, but also a bit, my heart was racing. And then 10 minutes later, another car came by and they stopped and they checked that I had water and supplies to go into the next long stretch. And they were so friendly. They knew about the tour routing, the Great Divide route and the race. And it was great to have a completely opposite experience with the next vehicle that passed by. To know that, obviously not all drivers are nutcases, but it was a reminder that you've got to pay attention to where you are, and you obviously can't do that easily if a car is approaching from behind. So I guess it's good that we were kind of facing each other and I could react a bit better. But it was unsettling. Yeah, you haven't seen a car for an hour.
If it had been 10 hours or something, you would have been going over this in your head for hours. So it was 10 minutes later is perfect to have it as a way to just kind of clear your thoughts and remember that most
totally
humans
agree.
are good, or maybe they're not drunk driving, or whatever the case may have been.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good thing you took the ditch, because maybe a lot of people wouldn't have taken the ditch and thought that no, the car's going to go by. He's going to see me. He's going to just avoid me. And then God knows what will happen.
Yeah, you don't know. So I think it was the right move, and it was an easy ditch to get into. It wasn't, it wasn't like a wipeout, move. It was just a easy roll.
Yeah, that's wild. So I guess last thing, I kind of bring the beginning to the end, or the end to the beginning. What made you decide to do the Tour Divide this year? I know we've talked about it before, a year ago when you were staying here and we were riding together, and at the time you're like, yeah, I'd like to do it one day, but it wasn't something you were saying I want to do it next year. So what made you decide to just go for it, and how did you prepare? Aside from just lots of riding.
Having a successful 2023 season and kind of seeing myself achieve good results in shorter events was a great building block. And I set the course record on the Log Driver's Waltz. I won the Buckshot. I won the Lost Elephant. I came in second in the Dark Divide. So all of those things kind of helped me feel a bit more confident in tackling a bigger challenge like the Tour Divide. I've done long road events, but not off-road. And so I felt like there was a bit of a gap there in terms of just taking care of yourself and your bike in more remote places. And I haven't been out on extended trips in the backcountry solo. And I've done more bikepacking with my partner James, and with kind of shorter races where there's people maybe closer to you. But so that was a gap that I was still a bit worried about. I also have a salsa cutthroat, and I got it used from a guy who had toured the northern portion of the route, and I kind of made a promise to get it to Antelope Wells when I bought it from him.
Right.
And I felt like, well, I have the bike, and it'd be kind of funny to deliver on this promise. But I do think it was having a really great 2023 season of shorter events kind of made me feel like I was ready to prepare for something longer. I also started working with Peta McSherry. She's bikepacking coach on Instagram, and she kind of said, I think if you want to set the record in the Tour Divide, I think you could potentially, you could and so that was really inspiring to have my coach say that I could have a really good run at this, and we worked together to prepare me physically, but she really helped on the logistics stuff. I have a hard time with maps and distances and elevations and resupply, processing all that. I get really it's just a bit intimidated and overwhelmed. And for shorter events, it's not that difficult to create a map of the points of interest for something that's 600K, but for something that's over 4,000, it's a lot. And so she kind of helped me work through that and get myself ready. And she checked in on me to make sure that I was doing the things I said I would do, watching YouTube videos about bike maintenance and getting stuff taken care of well ahead of time. And it was good. And then to prepare, I did some big rides. I did Ozark Gravel Doom at the end of March in Arkansas because I wanted to do a race that was early in the season to kind of test my fitness and see where I was at. And of course, I packed a bit differently. It's a 400-mile race, so it's much shorter. But, I think doing an early season event was good, and it helped me kind of focus on something over the winter when the Tour Divide did feel very far off. After Doom, I went to California and I stayed with some family friends. I work remotely, so I have like the opportunity to do wonderful things like this. And I toured the Stagecoach 400 loop, and I did some other kind of tours in Southern California. So it was a great chance for me to get that solo kind of backcountry experience in like a low stakes environment. So I could be off on my own, riding my bike like 100K a day, and being at a self-service and having to take care of my resupply and find spots to bivvy and figure those like little challenges out by myself. And that was super confidence building to me. And it wasn't the same as like a shakeout ride where you're kind of trying to do race pace with your race gear. Like it's in the desert. It's quite different.
Yeah.
But I felt good afterwards. I had a lot of fun. I enjoyed being alone. I didn't have like a I didn't hate myself. I discovered I was an okay person to be with. And that was super reassuring. So I got back to BC maybe early May, and then another event I did was the Buckshot here. And I had done it the previous year in really hot conditions, and this year it was super cold and wet and snowy.
So upsetting.
And it was completely opposite. And there was some like killer competition, like Spain Tough was there and some great riders from Vancouver and the Kootenays and Squamish. And so it was big competition and pretty rough weather. And that's, I had a lot of personal takeaways from that experience. And I made some changes to my kit because of that.
Okay.
And I'm glad that I went and raced it, even though it was uncomfortable and not at all as fun as the year before. But huge learning experience. And, it took place in Kamloops, 2 hours from my house. I got like no reason not to do it. So those are some of the big things I did to kind of get myself prepped. I've been using Dynamic Cyclist to, stretch and to help me with my strength training. And I started incorporating stretching probably about a year ago when I dislocated my finger. And then the strength training I started a bit before Christmas because I feel like I've got a lot of muscle imbalances, and I knew there'd be hike-a-bikes and times where I'd have to push and carry my bike. And potentially, like let's say my bike broke down, I might have to carry my stuff out or really hike a bike. So I wanted to be strong enough to do that. And I'm glad that glad that I was able to kind of dedicate some time to building up the rest of my body. I think those are kind of the main things I worked on.
Was there I have Dynamic Cyclist too, and I'm the worst. I don't know. At-home workouts, they don't work for me. It's too space cadet-y. Like, I just don't get around to it. I don't know why. I'm going to try it.
It's 15 minutes.
I know. I'm just like, I have to go change, and then maybe I'll have to shower after. I'm like, maybe tomorrow. But no, I've been meaning to make a big effort at improving on that, especially this summer, because I'm at like the heaviest I've ever been. I feel like that. Just been out to go riding more and do those body workouts, and I've got a couple kettlebells now too, so yeah, gonna start working on that.
Sweet. Have you been riding with Jasmine?
Yeah, dude, yes, she's
cool.
I've been commuting her to daycare, except not today. My butt is still pretty sore from my 130-kilometer mountain bike ride yesterday, 2 days ago, and so yeah, I decided not to, and it was raining. But yeah, it's a 10-kilometer ride to daycare. She loves it. We just sit there and we play sound games. I just make random sounds, like rhyming sounds, and she repeats them, and then we talk about what we see, or like attempt to talk about what we see, and little kid games stuff.
Wow, that's really awesome.
It's pretty fun.
I'm glad to hear that's happening.
Yeah, and I try to do it with either the mountain bike or the road bike, so I can like rip some mountain bike trails home or go do a road loop of the Gatineau Park and then come home, since it's my summer and I'm not working, so it's beautiful.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. Anyways, what's are you still planning on doing is it Caves and Coves or this summer?
It's on my radar, yeah. I'm heading to Fernie for the gravel grind this weekend, and then I'm spending a couple weeks in Cranbrook, going to do some dog sitting and just connect with some people in the Kootenays.
Nice.
And I'm doing an event at a bookstore there, but mostly just kind of recovering. And then my plan was to go to Vancouver Island after, and I am doing a ride with the Bikepacking Collective.
Oh, nice.
Pretty excited. We're going to Saturna. That'll be fun. And I have some family and friends there I'd like to see, but I'd like to do another kind of big tour before the year ends. And the Caves and Coves seems like an awesome route. And I've toured Vancouver Island fully, but just on the pavement, right? So there's so much there to explore, and I appreciate that, Salty Beard or Rob Byron has created this awesome route, because it's difficult too, because there's so many private roads on the island, and I've been there. I was staying with my auntie in the Noose Bay, and I kept planning routes and then getting to gates, and I was like, damn it, this is baloney. So I think that it's great that somebody else has figured out a route where there's no gates and private property, and some great things to see. So yeah, hoping to do that kind of end of August, early September sometime, and see what that's about. And that'll kind of be my my other big tour for the year.
Awesome. Well, what I might do is if you have anything you want to add that we didn't talk about that I kind of forgot or glossed over, now's a good time. Otherwise, I'll end the recording and we can just keep chatting.
I think you've covered everything. Yeah, I don't really have much else to add. You had some great questions, and thanks for bringing me back to the start of the Tour Divide, the Grand Depart, the Wall, the Coco Claims experience. And I would just say that if you've been contemplating touring or racing the Great Divide mountain bike route, get after it. It's a really special route. I think it can be done either way, and yeah, you hopefully won't regret it.
Hope not. All right. Well, I'll end the video recording and we can just keep chatting a bit. And
cool.
'cause I don't want to go quite yet, but yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Meaghan.
Thank you so much, Chris.